Well, good morning, Alice. Thank you so much for joining me this morning to talk about T visas. But first, I want to talk about what we did this weekend that you missed out on. I was really sad you weren't able to come with us to our first firm retreat. We went to Savannah outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And because you weren't able to come, we'll talk about why you weren't able to come here in a second, but we just decided this morning that you're going to join us on the other retreat. The rest of the team, the international team, is going to Colombia. I think you might have gotten actually the better end of the deal because that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to do that in August. Looking forward to that. But tell me why you weren't able to come this weekend with us.
Yes, I'm so excited about Colombia, but I could not get away this weekend. My oldest daughter just graduated from Texas A&M University, and I'm so proud of her. And she is going to be a kindergarten teacher. She just accepted her first real adulting job, but we had her big graduation party celebration scheduled this weekend with family and friends from all over. So we definitely could not miss celebrating that awesome achievement for her.
That is amazing. And I think what's more amazing is there's no way that you have a child who graduated from college already. You must have had her when you were in kindergarten yourself.
I wish I could say that, but if you want to believe that, that's okay.
And
Yes,
you have
me too.
and you have a few others that are going to be going through college soon. How many kids total do you have?
So I have 5 total kids that are ours legally. So we have 2 biological kids, and then we have our youngest 3 kiddos are adopted, but they're all our kids. And then we have another young man that we parent, but we're not legally his parents. So technically, we're raising 6 kids, but 5 have our last name.
You have a lot to juggle. That is amazing. What do you love more, being a mom or being an immigration attorney?
Oh gosh, being a mom. I mean, I love being a mom. It's not now if you ask me which is easier, I would say being an immigration attorney is easier than being a parent to 6 children. But what do I love more? I mean, you obviously get a lot of satisfaction being a mom. Nothing beats that.
That is so true. But that is saying a lot to compare to say that it's easier to be an immigration attorney, especially right now. You've been an immigration attorney for a long time. Why do you still choose to stay in this, especially given Trump 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, when I say being a mom is easier, that is not to say that, or being a mom is harder. That is not to say that being an immigration attorney is easy, because you're right. These days, it is a challenge. It's more of a challenge now than in any other time in my 18 years as an immigration attorney. It is definitely more difficult these days, but I love what I do and I love my clients and I love the success stories. I love being able to work with them and treat them with the respect that they deserve, that maybe they haven't always received. So I just really like what I do, and the people are amazing.
And your clients love you, so you're doing something right. I think it's probably that mom aspect. I love that our team is full of moms, and I feel like it really does kind of pour into the way. I mean, I wouldn't say we mother our clients, but we really have that nurturing, kind, and compassionate. I love that because I think that attorneys sometimes get a reputation as being cold or uncaring, or they just want your money. And of course, we need, we've gone to law school. Many of us have loans from law school still. We have a large team right now that we have to pay. So of course we have to receive money for the cases that we do. But I think that all of us really put that extra effort into the cases, even down to the client care coordinators. We're all just caring for these clients. So I think that being a mom helps with that, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I always tell my kids, I'm going to trust you enough to tell you the truth, good, bad, or ugly. And you know what? That's exactly what I tell my clients is I may not always have good news for you, but I'm going to be honest with you. And if there's an option, I'm going to find it and I'm going to fight for it. But I'm also going to respect you enough to tell you the truth. I'm not going to, jerk you around and make you pay thousands and thousands of dollars and then it doesn't get anywhere. That's not helpful. That's not helpful for families. And I look at my clients not as numbers, but as families. Immigration affects how a family functions. It affects whether a family is together. It affects the stability of how they work together. And as a mom, that's important, right? How your family functions and how your family survives is crucial to who you are. And so I always respect my clients enough to tell them, look, yes, you have options, or you know what? No, you don't have options. But here's how I can help you prepare, or, here's how I can love you through this, or, whatever they need, to just be there and respect them enough to tell them the truth.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for saying that. And also, just a shameless plug, here at Molina Immigration, we offer a free discovery call where we can take a look at your situation. And Alice, that's actually one of your responsibilities here, is reviewing all of those details that our team gets, and to see what the options are, and using creativity at times, right? Or using that aggressive mama bear, you could call it, to figure out how we can help people. And you said that you don't want to leave that task. We're looking at bringing on another immigration attorney, and I heard you say, like, I want to stay on the intake review. So tell me what you love about doing that.
Honestly, I think so far that's my favorite part, because I am faced with so many different scenarios that I get to use all of the experience that I've gained over the past 20 years. I've been an immigration attorney for about 18, but I actually worked another 2 years before that for an immigration law firm. So I have 20 years of immigration experience, and just all kinds of practice. And so I really like an intake, just the variety. We get people from all over the world, all types of situations, and being able to really assess someone's situation quickly but accurately. That is a heavy burden that I take very, very seriously. And so I want to make sure that we're giving accurate information, but I just love the variety and getting to talk to people from all over the world throughout that intake process.
Yeah. And I love that we can do that for the most part for free, because most of the time we're able to do that. There are some times where there's a deeper dive that has to be done, and then they end up talking with you directly, and there is a fee for that. But for the most part, we're able to do that for free. And I love that we can offer that to our community, not just here locally, but we serve people around the world. So it's amazing that our team is able to do that. Part of your history in immigration was for what I call the dark side. Um, Talk to me about that experience and how that shaped you.
So, when I was first a lawyer, I was in private practice, and I was in private practice up in the Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati area. And I practiced immigration and I loved it. And then all of a sudden, the Cincinnati Immigration Court closed and we had like no notice. So my practice was severely impacted. And so I was looking around, and up there in that part of the country, there was a really good rapport between the private bar and the government attorneys. And I did a lot of work in the space of human trafficking and that kind of thing. And I ended up getting a job with the Department of Homeland Security, and I was one of the ICE prosecutors in Houston, which is actually where I'm from. So I worked there for between 4 and 5 years, and was a prosecutor here.
What was that like? What did you learn being there?
Well, I did learn that the relationship between the private bar and the government attorneys is very different, depending on what part of the country you're in. In Houston, it was more of an animus relationship. It wasn't as cordial. So that was a bit of a challenge for me to get used to. But it never changed how I practiced. I always practiced and with a level of respect for opposing counsel, with respect for the clients. And, I looked at it as, hey, the law is there for a reason, but that it's not just about enforcement, it's also about benefits. And so if the right person gets asylum, I'm sleeping great at the end of the day. I don't feel like I lost a case. I feel like I helped enforce the law. And there were times that that happened and it was great. So, yes, there were some downsides for sure. It's a challenge and it's difficult. That's probably one of the reasons that I wasn't there too terribly long. But I was able to have still some job satisfaction whenever people were walking away with benefits as well. So, but then I returned to private practice.
To the right side.
That's where
Yeah.
my heart is.
Yes. I have met so many attorneys from the dark side over the last, I've been an attorney now for 15 years. And you were probably, if I would have met you, you would have been one of the ones that was, available to communicate with, open to communication, and not always open to agreeing to approve a case, or, obviously you're not in a position to approve it, but we call it agreeing to a grant. Basically, like, you're not going to oppose if the judge wants to grant asylum or any other application. And so not all that wasn't always the case with those attorneys, but I always felt like for the right case with the right facts that I could trust, that I wasn't going to have to take my client through a really difficult testimony, recalling trauma and horrible things. So I always appreciated those who worked with that level of humanity, I guess you could say. Not to say that the other ones aren't human, but I think that sometimes people can take their job a little too far, and I think as attorneys we want to win all the time, and I think that can sometimes happen for the government too, that they want to win, and winning for them means like deporting. So to find an attorney who's balanced, who understands that like there's definitely situations where someone should win, and being willing to do that. So I never met you while you were working for the dark side, but if I had, I'm sure that you would have been one of those. And in fact, I'm wondering if we were in Texas at the same time, because I was practicing from 2011 or 2010 to 2016 in Harlingen, and I appeared a couple of times in Houston. Were you there at that time?
I was with DHS 2010 to late 2014.
Same time. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I met you. Don't worry. Probably not. Houston and Harlingen are about 5 hours apart, so I mostly just practiced in
And I was primarily stationed in one of the detention centers here. So,
oh, okay.
yeah. So I primarily worked at the detention center closest to the airport. And so I worked with the higher level criminals because of my background in human trafficking. We did a lot of prosecutions with the higher level criminal element.
Okay.
And so that was kind of more of what I did.
Interesting. I did not know this about you.
Yeah,
okay.
I wasn't the whole time in detention center, but more than half of my time I was spent in the detention centers.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we're going to be talking more about human trafficking. But while we're talking about Texas, let's just say how much you love Texas and why you love Texas.
I do, because it's the greatest state. Everybody in any place in the world can look at a map and see and recognize the shape of Texas. And I love it. And, you go big or go home, right? I mean, we have the rodeo, we have chili, we have all the things. So I love it here. My family's here. So this is where I have a ranch here.
Of course you do, because all Texans have a ranch.
We bought property, and yeah, so we're developing our future retirement out in East Texas. So we love it here. It's great. It's hot as all get out, but I will say, Abigail, working with you and with the team here, I have never been more aware of how many times I use the word y'all than here, because people point it out constantly.
I think Zinni and Tammy both say y'all, though, because of being in Oklahoma. But yeah,
They do.
I still say it from my time. I feel a little bit like an imposter when I say it, because I'm obviously not from Texas. I mean, obviously don't have a Southern, but like I loved saying y'all when I was in Texas.
It's just in the vocabulary. I think it's innate in my blood.
Yeah.
As well as bless your heart.
Bless your heart. Here in the Northwest, we would say you guys. Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, we don't say you.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's jump into it. We're going to talk about T visas. What I remember from law school immigration class was that there's an alphabet soup of visas, and that basically, like every letter in the alphabet, you can find a visa. Most of them don't like relate to it. Like a student visa is a B visa. A student visa is an F visa. A tourist visa is a B. So it's not like it relates to the letter, but this is actually one case type where it does relate. Like it's the first letter of the word. So T visa, you mentioned human trafficking before, that was probably your start into that when you were working for the government. But tell us briefly, what is a T visa?
So, a T visa is a particular non immigrant status available to people who have, and I choose to use the term survivors of human trafficking versus victims of human
Thank you.
trafficking. And so it is for people who are survivors of human trafficking, and it gives them a certain level of protection while also enabling them to work with law enforcement to detect, investigate, and prosecute the bad guys. And that's what we want because that's what makes our community safer.
Yes, I love that you use the word survivor. I'm trying to break myself of that habit from victim, because we are not victims. If we have lived through it, we have survived it, whatever that it is in our lives. So we're going to talk about some examples of human trafficking. But I think that most people, when you say that word, would immediately think, well, I haven't been trafficked. Like, what comes to mind for me is somebody being moved from one location to another. So break this down for us. What does this mean exactly?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot of misconceptions about human trafficking. I think the number one is people think that there's some type of smuggling element to it, that human smuggling and human trafficking are the same thing, but they're really not. Human smuggling is a crime against a border. That's crossing a border unlawfully. Okay. Human trafficking is a crime against a person. And a lot of people think that human trafficking involves some type of violence or kidnapping or something. But the reality is, most people know they're traffickers. So there's just a lot of misconceptions there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to break this down even more. But before we do that, you said that it's like a visa. Does it like temporary status, permanent status? What do people get from this?
So a T visa is temporary, but it can lead to permanency. And so someone who is granted a T visa, they're in a non-immigrant status, but 3 years later they become eligible for a green card, which is permanent residence.
Okay. And during that 3 years while they're waiting, what kind of status or what kind of benefits do they have?
So they are a non-immigrant status. So it's kind of like if you're a student, you have a student visa. If you're, a tourist, you have a tourist visa. Well, this is a trafficking visa, and so it grants you the ability to stay in the United States. You can get work authorization after a certain period of time, and the government makes certain determinations. And then because of the specific kind of visa, there are also some social services that are available to survivors of trafficking who hold this status, but it's primarily protection from removal from the United States and the ability to live and stay and work here in safety.
Hmm. And right now, that is more than ever what people are looking for, is safety and security, and being being kept safe from deportation. So this is an option that we want people to consider. It's an option that we offer to many of our clients when the information is there. Sometimes we have to ask certain questions to find out if they might be a survivor of trafficking. So what are some of the questions that we usually ask people to uncover this?
So there are a lot of specific legal elements that we have to prove in order to show eligibility. And so, technically, what human trafficking is for immigration purposes is it's a crime in which a trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to compel someone to provide labor or sex. And they do this in a lot of ways, and force, fraud, and coercion is a big element that we have to prove. So a lot of times we ask questions like, what did they say to you? What did they do to you? What were you afraid was going to happen if you didn't do what they asked? And these are tough questions, but they're crucial to building a case to show eligibility. And we try to do that in the most empathetic way that we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be difficult to pull up these memories because many times when people survive traumatic events, or even, just sometimes it doesn't even have to be that traumatic, but we don't want to remember these things. So let's just jump ahead. I was going to leave this for a little bit later, but let's just give some examples so people can start wrapping their head around what does it look like to have survived a human trafficking situation. Maybe some of the extreme and some of the middle, different things that you've seen.
Okay. So I'll give you one that most people don't realize is human trafficking. Okay. And that's what I call like a domestic servant marriage. Okay. So let's say, for example, there's a guy from a super conservative, like a patriarchal society in a community. Okay. And he has approached some, lower income family of a girl and says, "Hey, I'm going to marry your daughter." And I'm going to take her to the United States and I'm going to take care of her and everything's going to be great. Okay. And, the girl has been raised in that kind of society. She knows that arranged marriage is part of her future. That's part of the culture and it's accepted there. And so the family agrees and she comes to the United States. But then once she gets here, it's not really a marriage. He has basically purchased her from this family to come and maybe take care of his children from another marriage, or to just be a slave, or maybe he runs a business and he forces her to work in his business without pay. So that is human trafficking, and that's human trafficking within a marriage, and a lot of people don't recognize that.
Right, because it's like you're saying, it's culturally understood that the wife will be basically a servant. I mean, it's accepted. And so how would you convince that person, that woman in that situation, that this is not okay, that this is actually human trafficking?
So I look at my job not really as convincing anyone, but more of educating them. And it's educating her, "Hey, look, what happened to you is not right. Like, this is not what marriage to a United States citizen is supposed to look like. This is not okay conditions. If you work, you deserve to get paid for work." And so if she is being shamed or taken advantage of, or coerced in some way with threats of her immigration status, those are things that are not okay. And if and when she is ready to pursue immigration options separate from her husband, we're going to be right there to help her through that.
Thank you. I love that also because that educational component, it really does come from a place of mothering, right? Like of good mothering. I think sometimes the temptation as mothers is to tell our kids what's best for them and force them to make certain decisions. But I think the good moms are the ones that can take a step back and say, here's the educational component. Here's an explanation why I think that you should make this decision. But I'm going to trust that you can make those decisions for you. And I think a lot of our clients come to us without having that autonomy, without having that ability to make decisions for themselves, and to be able to offer to them the option, like, you can do nothing. That is an option.
Yeah.
When you're ready, we're ready to help you, but it has to be on their time and their yeah, when they're ready.
Yeah, and it's just letting them know, "Hey, these are the pros and the cons," and what works good for one family may be totally different for another family. But, I always tell them, "I'm just a lawyer. I am not a member of your family. You are the best decision maker for your family. And you tell me, after knowing the facts, after knowing what the situation is, you make whatever decision is best for your family." And that's what we do. I
Yeah.
work for you.
Yeah.
So,
That is so true. So let's talk, now that you've given us an example, we'll come back to some more examples, but you mentioned pros and cons. What are some pros and cons of the T visa?
I mean, the pro is obviously you get protection here in the United States. A lot of our survivors maybe were brought here without a visa, or maybe they were brought here and then forced to violate their visa, or maybe they've overstayed a visa. And so a lot of people don't have any current status in the United States. And so the T visa does offer status and protection in the United States. So that's the biggest pro. The other is once the government makes a certain level of determination, you can be eligible for work authorization, and that helps them get on their feet. They're earning their own money. They're having financial stability and independence, which has helped setting them up for success. So, there's a lot of pros for living, working, and being secure in your status in the United States. As far as cons, I would say the T visa is rather challenging to prove because it does require our clients to relive these super traumatic events. And while we try our best to be mindful of that and to prepare our affidavits and our statements in a way that gives them time to relive these, we are still having to ask them to convey some really personal, private, sometimes shameful instances that have happened. And so that is a downside. It is sometimes you want to, as a practitioner, do your absolute best to avoid re-traumatizing people by having to share their stories. But that is a huge downside. But it's part of it's a challenge to prove these cases, and the client's full cooperation is really required.
Yeah. Aside from the proof talking about proof, so evidence, aside from the declaration, what other types of things are required in order to apply for the T visa?
Well, if you're familiar, I know you did another video with somebody the other day about a U visa, and a U visa briefly is for victims of certain specified crimes. And human trafficking counts as that. So some of our trafficking survivors are eligible for both a U visa and a T visa. And we have to work with them and assess what is the best option for them. Or maybe we pursue both, which you can do. But the T visa is specifically for survivors of human trafficking. And so you have to prove these elements. But one big difference is a U visa requires law enforcement certification, which means law enforcement has to sign off on and agree to your immigration application. A T visa does not require law enforcement certification. Now, it's optional. You can certainly provide it, and it is also good evidence, but it's not required for a trafficking visa, which is really good because these cases criminally are hard to prosecute. And a lot of them, unfortunately, don't make it to the prosecution level.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think that's why then that requirement isn't as strict as with like the U visa, recognizing that difficulty?
I do, because you can be a survivor of human trafficking, but maybe your trafficker what ended up getting prosecuted for something like a tax violation, or a loitering or harassment or something. Maybe they end up getting prosecuted for some lower level criminal activity because that's in the best interest of the prosecutor, right? But that doesn't mean that that's in the best interest of the survivor. And so we try to get other options to offer them levels of protection and security to, again, let them get on their own 2 feet and move forward. So I do think that that's one of the reasons that the T visa was kind of carved out for its own unique status.
Yeah, great. Thank you for explaining that. And speaking of the U visa, I think one of the benefits of the T visa is that the U visa has such a long wait list. Can you explain about that wait list, and is the same thing for T visa?
Yeah, that's really hard. So there are only certain number of U visas allocated each year and a certain number of T visas allocated each year. And once those are used up, then everybody else that qualifies just goes on a wait list. And so the trafficking list there is still a list, but it's a lot shorter. And it's not very long to have to wait. And some years it's current and you don't have any wait period. So, that is a big perk as well. I think right now the current processing time for a T visa application is about 21 months. But you can get work authorization during that pendency. And then once it's approved, you should be able to wait and get your visa pretty quickly after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I think of human trafficking, the example that comes to mind is sex trafficking. So someone who's brought either brought to the U.S. or used within the U.S. for trafficking, for sex trafficking. And I think in my mind, I wonder how common really is that. Um, can you speak to that? Like, is this still happening? I think of it as something like this is, no longer happening in modern America. This is like a very old thing that used to happen. Is it still happening? And like in our neighborhoods and, like where are these things happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wish I had a better answer, but unfortunately, this is very, very common. And again, I go back to saying there's a lot of things that do qualify as human trafficking that people just don't realize. And, just as an example, there's a big issue in the United States with drug abuse. And we see a lot in the communities, whether it's someone who's recovering from drug addiction and they're then taken advantage of in some way, and that's held over them, that they find themselves in a trafficking situation. Or maybe it's a situation where a mom is addicted and she lives the life and she is a prostitute, and her daughter is old enough and now she feels like her daughter should be contributing to the household. That is human trafficking. A parent can traffic their own child in their own home and their own community. And, unless you have a practitioner that knows what they're looking for and knows the questions to ask, it may be missed. So, shameless plug, if there's something that is just not sitting right with you, but you don't know what it is, maybe it's time to just talk to an attorney and find out, let them ask the questions that need to be asked and screen for, to see if this qualifies. And, we're not one of those firms that's going to make a square peg fitting a round hole, right? We're not going to find trafficking where it doesn't exist. That's not who we are. But if it exists, we want to be able to let you know that there are options.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to comment to those who want to support immigrants. I'm hearing all the time, especially right now, how can I support? How can I help? Anyone who's in maybe an educational field or a social service field where they're having regular contact with immigrants, what kinds of things can they be on the lookout for to maybe help rescue people from trafficking situations? What are maybe some telltale signs or some questions, some things that they should be paying attention to?
Yeah. So I think a big issue in the United States, one that we see a lot of trafficking cases reach the level of prosecution, is through restaurants. When you go to a restaurant, see your waiter as a human, see the hostess as a human. Look at them, make eye contact. Do they look okay? If you get slipped a note that says, I need help, take it seriously. And we've seen that before. And so just be aware of your surroundings. The DHS slogan for the Blue campaign, which is the human trafficking, is if you see something, say something. You probably see it at your Walmart checkout. If you see something, say something. You see it at the airport. These signs are everywhere. And that's the truth. If you see something that doesn't sit right, or if you're mom and you have that motherly instinct, right? If
I was
you know
just gonna say, yeah.
right, you step up and you say something. You ask, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Are you all right? Can I get you anything? Do you want to meet me in the bathroom and tell me something? Um, but
I don't
but
know
yeah,
why I just
I know. I think I just did a thumbs up and it made my computer do bubbles or something. Sorry.
it's okay.
But yeah, if you see something, say something and
Yeah.
follow your instincts.
Yeah, exactly. Um, And I before you said that, I was like, yes, the mother instinct. We have that. I think a lot of times we ignore it though because we don't want to interfere. We don't want to offend. It can be challenging to move past that, but unfortunately, it requires us stepping out of our comfort zone to help people because they're not always going to be like, "Hey, here I am. I need help." They're not always going to slip that note saying that
Right.
they need help, but I think of an example, massage parlors. There's many different places where, I mean, are these legitimate parlors or are they, ones where you can get something extra done? So give us some more examples. These are some of the things that I think people commonly think of, but give us some of the more unthought of or maybe less understood types of trafficking situations.
So I mentioned a minute ago taking advantage of addicts. So, say you have someone who's recently released from like a drug rehab and they're just really, really wanting to get clean and stay clean. And they get connected with what they think is a church for support and guidance. And they just go all in, right? I mean, we know that addicts have addictive personalities. And so sometimes they go from one addiction to another. And sometimes they're trying to channel that need into what they think is a good thing. And they dive all into a church or an organization. And then they find themselves living on a commune and working in a field and, serving a community, but not getting paid a dime. And then they feel stuck because anybody who complains gets kicked out of the community, and then they're on their own and they don't think that they can survive as a recovering addict outside of the community. And those are instances of human trafficking, right? If you end up getting coerced based on your personal vulnerabilities into a situation where someone else is exploiting you and gaining a benefit from your labor or services, and you're not seeing the benefits of that, that's not right. That's illegal and it's human trafficking. And so, unfortunately, we've seen that happen, a lot, is people taking advantage of recovering alcoholics and recovering drug addicts, things like that.
Yes. And this is maybe going a little too personal, but when I was in my early 20s, I was not recovering, but I was very into a church. And now looking back, I believe that what they were doing was trafficking many of the young people that were there. And I've heard of this also in other situations because so many people just want to give and, don't understand like boundaries necessarily. And there is so much like manipulation that happens unfortunately, in many religious circles. And so taking advantage, using people's, excuse me, their labor and not paying them is like literally trafficking, right?
Right. And you have to know the difference between, hey, am I volunteering my service to my church? Because I mean, you and I are both parts of faith communities. Like there's a certain level of, hey, you want to give back and you want to volunteer. And so you have to be able to look at from the outside looking in, what is that healthy boundary? And is this someone who is willfully volunteering their time for their church? Or is this someone who feels coerced or like they have to do this in order for them to be able to remain a part of the community? And those are just fine lines that you have to walk. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I had a
I have
question.
another example,
Yes.
another example that people don't really think of. There's something called boyfriending. I don't
Hmm.
know if you're familiar with that term, but a lot of people again think that human trafficking involves some level of kidnapping, and it usually 99% of the time does not. And there's something called boyfriending, where hey, this couple or these people, these two individuals go to a party at a mutual friend's house, and they meet and they hit it off, and then they share Instagram and they start talking and dating, and everything is great. She thinks this is her boyfriend, but then he takes her out somewhere and ends up coercing her into doing some sexual favor for one of his friends, and he blows it off like it's no big deal. This is what I expect from you as my girlfriend to do. And by that point, she's emotionally invested in the relationship. She has some connection. And, while a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, that would never happen to me, I would never, ever do that under any circumstances, you know, it's easy to judge when it's not you and you're not in that situation. And so I would just caution people like, hey, it actually happens more often than you think. And
Mhm.
so, so much so that there's a term for it, boyfriending, right? They call them
Mhm.
either boyfriends or Romeo pimps. And these are terms that you wouldn't think that your boyfriend is a pimp or that he's pimping you out. But when you look at the facts of what is happening, that's what it is. And it's human
Yeah.
trafficking.
Yeah. We're using a lot of examples here where the survivor is a woman, a female, but it happens to men as well. So let's give some examples for that.
Absolutely. It's actually equal with men, women, and children. There are just as many men as there are women as there are children. And those are the three primary categories that you've got to fall into one of those, but there are just as many in each category. But we see a lot of both labor and sex trafficking for men as well. But just the first thing that comes to mind, I guess, for men would be labor recruitment. Say, someone is at home in their home country, and it's really common in their community for people to go away, maybe for, 4 to 6 to 9 months out of the year, to go to the United States. They work, and then, they come back and provide for their family. And that's really, really common. Well, one thing that we see is recruiters go and identify people in the community and say, hey, we'll get you a visa. We'll bring you to the United States. You'll work at this great wage. You'll have all this money to pay off your family. But we just need you to invest, $5,000 on the front end to pay the visa fees, blow it off like it's no big deal. And so, people are taking out a loan to pay the recruiter, or the recruiter says, hey, but the employer will front you this money for you to come. And then you walk into the United States owing this $5,000 debt. But they tell you, hey, you'll be able to earn that and pay it off in no time. But then once they arrive, not only do they have this $5,000 debt already before they've even started working, now they start working and the employer is charging them for housing and transportation and food. And they rack up all these additional charges to where they're not making any money, and they're not able to pay off their debt, and they're definitely not able to send anything back home. But now they feel stuck because if they leave and go back home to their community, they have this big debt, which is culturally very shameful, or they won't be able to get another job. And so, you have people that get stuck in these situations where they never get to pay off a debt. And that's a debt bondage form of human trafficking.
Yeah, what was coming to mind was learning in school about indentured servitude, and it's like these are things you thought happened hundreds of years ago that are still
Yeah.
happening today, and slavery too. Really, you want to look at some of the situations. So one question that I think people would have is, well, this is sounding like maybe something that happened to me, but maybe like 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Mhm.
Would I still qualify now for a T visa if so much time has passed? I'm no longer in that situation. Would I still qualify?
Right. So we look at the situation that happened to you and determine whether it meets the elements of human trafficking. But then we also have to show that this is causing you issues in your life, right? The trauma, and we know a lot about trauma nowadays that we didn't know before, but trauma can be deep seated, and the consequences can be long lasting and long standing, especially in situations where it's unresolved. just because it happened to you 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and you were lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to get out of that situation, doesn't mean that you're completely healed and you have no long lasting effects from this. And a lot of people, we learned, still do. And so part of what we recommend, and not require, but recommend, are evaluations by outside professionals like therapists and counselors to help you dive in and really look at, hey, how did this really affect your life? How does this affect your relationships in your family now? Does this affect how you make decisions? And are these things that you can get healing and treatment for? And so assessing the trafficking situation, but also assessing how this has impacted your life, is really important. But yes, no matter when it happened, you are still eligible. It may be harder to prove a case when something happened 10, 20 years ago because we have the same evidentiary requirement, but it's not impossible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for saying that. This has been so helpful, so educational, Alice. I really appreciate taking the time to do this. I want to end by talking a little bit about your time here with us at Molina Immigration. You've only been with us a few months, but we are quickly growing, and you're working currently from Houston. Our physical office is located in Springfield, Oregon, but we have people all over the world right now. So talk to me about what your experience has been so far. Speak actually to the next attorney that we're going to be hiring. We don't know who it is yet, but speak to them, why they should make the choice like you did a couple months ago to join our team.
So to the next attorney, it seems too good to be true. But don't think that it is. Because Abigail is who she says she is, and she runs her firm the way she says she does. And that was, I think, the biggest concern that I had is, talking about honoring people and respecting their boundaries and respecting their work-life balance, because I am a mom of 6 kids. Like, that's important to me. That is my priority, and having the flexibility to do those things as well as pursue my passion, which is helping immigrants. And so being able to have those balance, being able to be respected and valued as part of a team where every single member of the team wants to be there.
Yes.
And nobody is here because it's just a job. Like, everybody gets along, everybody is kind. I mean, it really seems too good to be true. But a few months in, I have never been happier with a professional decision in my life.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. That was one of my biggest takeaways from this weekend, bringing the team together, and we just had 8 of us. So we were missing you, and one other person here in Oregon didn't get to go, and then of course, obviously the international team wasn't there as well. But seeing everybody come together, we're all most of us are virtual, but everybody came together, and I swear I thought like everybody had been working day in, day out for years together. The way that the banter they had, the joking, the teasing, the fun, everybody just connected so well together. I was really most happy about that, to see that it is possible. And I think that's one of the things that's really impacted our firm. The benefit of the pandemic, the benefit of the horrible year that 2020 was. My takeaway from that is that people can work from wherever, whenever, and if they love what they do, they're gonna, give it their best. And if we all are able to balance our lives with our professions, then why not? Why can't we do that? So I'm
But
so
also
glad.
the intentionality of connecting and having our meetings that we have, where we have fun meetings, not just meetings about work. We have fun meetings where we get to talk to each other and connect on a regular basis. So we really get to know each other.
Where we can debate chili and why it should have beans in it.
Okay, that's a whole can of worms, Abigail.
A whole can of beans.
Oh my goodness. The right answer is good chili does not have beans. That is the right answer.
The wrong answer. The wrong answer.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
we talk about things like that in our fun meetings. So it's good. Laughter is good because especially right now that, we're in a very serious time right now in our country. And honestly, I don't know where we will be with immigration in the next 4 years, but I know that my commitment is to be that mama bear, to continue to fight for our clients and to, fight for what is right and what is just and what is good. And we believe that immigrants make America great. And I'm going to go down swinging if we're going down.
I'm with you.
And I love that. So thank you, Alice, for joining me. We will talk again soon. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I recommend anyone to reach out to us, 541-653-8899. We would love to talk about your options, go through some of the questions, do some digging. I feel like actually, let's just say this. Not every immigration attorney or immigration office offers T visas. It's pretty specialized. It's pretty challenging to do. And so if you have in the past talked to an immigration attorney and they said that there were no options, give us a chance. Let us ask those questions and talk with you about your past and see if there's anything there. Anything else you want to add, Alice?
No, I appreciate the education to the community. I think it's great. And I'm looking forward to getting up to Oregon next month to meet y'all at the baseball game.
That's right. Yes. So we try to do some regular events here and bring in some of our virtual team. And so that's the next event. It's June 22nd at the M's. If you're local, come and see us at the M's game. We're a sponsor there. It's a local baseball team.
Yep. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Abigail.
Thank you, Alice.